A police officer was shot twice in the face and chest, one bullet entering his cheekbone and blowing away bits of his teeth. The man convicted maintained his innocence for 22 years until his final breath. On September 21, 2011, Troy Anthony Davis was executed by lethal injection at Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison. The crime that sent him to death row happened on August 19, 1989. 22 years. That's how long Davis spent on death row for a murder he insisted he never committed. No physical evidence linked him to the crime. He was convicted solely on eyewitness testimony. Davis had two other execution dates stayed in 2008, one by the United States Supreme Court. Why? Because something was wrong with the case. Something that would make headlines around the world. Officer Mark MacPhail was working security at a Burger King when he tried to intervene in the beating of a homeless man. What happened next would launch one of the most controversial death penalty cases in American history. A case that would divide a nation and raise questions that still echo today. Officer Mark MacPhail had no way of knowing this would be his final shift. The 27-year-old Savannah police officer was working his off-duty security detail, a common practice among officers seeking to supplement their modest salaries. MacPhail's beat encompassed the Greyhound bus station and the adjacent Burger King parking lot, a convergence point where travelers, locals, and the city's forgotten often intersected. MacPhail knew the regular faces, the potential trouble spots, the delicate balance required to maintain order without escalating tension. His presence was both deterrent and reassurance, a uniformed figure representing stability in an environment where stability was often fleeting. The initial disturbance began with Larry Young, a homeless man whose weathered face and unsteady gait marked him as one of Savannah's displaced. Young found himself confronted by individuals who took issue with his presence, his beer, his very existence in their vicinity. The confrontation escalated with disturbing speed. Young was struck in the head with a pistol, the metal connecting with bone in a sickening impact that sent him reeling. Young's cries for help pierced the ambient noise of bus engines and late-night conversations. These cries carried the urgent, desperate quality of someone in genuine distress. Officer MacPhail heard those cries. His training, his instincts, and his fundamental sense of duty compelled him to respond. He moved toward the disturbance, his footsteps measured but purposeful as he approached what he believed to be a routine intervention. He moved to assist Young, to de-escalate whatever situation had prompted the man's calls for help. MacPhail represented the thin blue line between order and chaos, between protection and vulnerability. His presence should have been enough to calm the situation. Instead, it triggered a sequence of events that would end in tragedy. The confrontation that followed unfolded with brutal efficiency. MacPhail never had the opportunity to draw his weapon. The shooter acted with deadly precision, firing multiple shots before the officer could react. The first bullet entered MacPhail's cheekbone, tearing through tissue and bone before exiting through his neck. A second round penetrated his torso, each impact driving him backward. The shooter's demeanor during these critical moments is noteworthy. There was no panic, no visible emotion, only calculated violence. The gunman stood over the fallen officer, his actions deliberate and precise. MacPhail lay wounded, but not yet dead, his body crumpled on the asphalt of the Burger King parking lot. The shooter, standing over Officer MacPhail's prone form, fired a final shot directly into the officer's face. As per witnesses' account, there was a smirky-like smile on the gunman's face as he delivered the killing blow. The execution-style nature of this final shot transformed an already horrific crime into something that will end a life with coldest calculation you can think of. The shooter's departure was as methodical as his attack. He simply walked away, leaving Officer MacPhail's body motionless on the pavement, surrounded by the detritus of violence, blood, teeth fragments, and the shattered remains of what had begun as a routine evening. Bystanders stood frozen in the aftermath, their minds struggling to process what they had witnessed. The speed of the violence, the brutality of the execution, the casual manner of the killer's departure, all of it combined to create a scene that would be seared into memory. The call came in at 11:35 p.m. Officer down. Burger King parking lot adjacent to the Greyhound station. Code 3 response. Squad cars converged on the scene, with sirens wailing through Savannah's humid night air. Red and blue lights strobed against the brick facades of surrounding buildings. Officers arrived to find their colleague face down on the asphalt, his body motionless in a spreading pool of blood. Officer Mark MacPhail lay where he had fallen, his mouth filled with blood that had poured from massive internal injuries. Fragments of teeth littered the sidewalk nearby, physical evidence of the violence that had been inflicted upon him. The responding officers immediately recognized the gravity of the scene. This was not an officer-down situation requiring medical intervention. McFale was beyond help. The immediate assessment was clinical and devastating. McPhail's facial injuries were extensive, the result of a final shot fired at close range. His uniform, soaked with blood, bore silent testimony to the multiple gunshot wounds that had ended his life. The responding officers, trained to remain professional in crisis situations, found themselves confronting the murder of one of their own. Crime scene protocols activated with mechanical precision. Yellow tape stretched across the parking lot perimeter, while officers established a secure boundary around the bus station and Burger King. The area transformed from a crime scene into an investigation zone, with every detail cataloged and preserved for forensic analysis. Initial witness interviews began immediately. Detectives worked to identify and separate the individuals who had observed the shooting, gathering preliminary statements while memories remained fresh. Shell casings were collected and marked for ballistics analysis. Every detail, no matter how seemingly insignificant, was preserved for potential relevance to the investigation. The clinical language of the autopsy report could not mask the brutality of what had occurred. The first bullet had entered McPhail's cheekbone, traveling through his face before exiting through his neck. The trajectory indicated the officer had been facing his attacker when the shooting began. A second round had penetrated his torso, causing internal bleeding and organ damage. Both wounds were serious, potentially fatal. But it was the third shot that had ended McPhail's life. Fired at close range directly into his face, this bullet had caused massive trauma to his skull and brain. The wound pattern and gunpowder residue indicated the shooter had been standing over the fallen officer when he delivered this final, execution-style shot. News of McPhail's murder sent shockwaves through the Savannah Police Department. Officers who had worked alongside him struggled to process the loss of a colleague who had died attempting to help a stranger in distress. He was 27 years old, married to Joan McFale, and father to 2 young children. His decision to work off-duty security represented the financial realities faced by many police officers. The need to supplement modest salaries through additional employment. McFale had been trying to provide for his family when he was killed. The community's reaction was swift and intense. The murder of a police officer struck at the heart of public safety and social order. Citizens who had never known McFale personally found themselves affected by the circumstances of his death, a young father killed while trying to help someone in need. The investigation began with witness statements collected in the immediate aftermath of the shooting. Multiple individuals had observed the attack on Officer MacPhail, providing investigators with detailed descriptions of the shooter and the sequence of events. These eyewitness accounts formed the foundation of the case against Troy Anthony Davis. Forensic examination of the crime scene yielded limited physical evidence. No fingerprints connected Davis to the weapon or the scene. No DNA evidence linked him to the murder. The case would rest primarily on eyewitness identification and testimony from individuals who claimed to have witnessed the shooting. Ballistics analysis confirmed that the bullets recovered from McPhail's body came from a .38 caliber weapon, but the gun was never recovered. Investigators conducted extensive searches of the area, but were unable to locate the murder weapon. For days after Officer McPhail's murder, on August 23, 1989, Troy Anthony Davis was arrested. The 20-year-old had been identified by multiple witnesses as the shooter. Davis immediately denied involvement in the crime, maintaining his innocence throughout the arrest process and subsequent interrogation. The arrest warrant detailed the charges against Davis: malice murder in the death of Officer McPhail, aggravated assault on Larry Young, and aggravated assault on Michael Cooper in a separate shooting incident earlier that evening. Davis's initial statements to investigators were consistent. He had not been present at the shooting, had not owned or possessed a gun, and had no involvement in Officer McPhail's death. These denials would remain unchanged throughout his 22 years on death row. The impact of McPhail's death extended far beyond his immediate family. His widow Joan faced the sudden reality of raising two small children alone while dealing with the trauma of her husband's murder. His mother relentlessly demanded justice for her son. The posthumous recognition McFale received included departmental honors and community memorials. His name was added to law enforcement monuments honoring officers killed in the line of duty. On November 15, 1989, a Chatham County grand jury returned an indictment against Troy Anthony Davis for the murder of Officer McPhail. Additional charges included aggravated assault on Larry Young and aggravated assault on Michael Cooper. The trial began in 1991, with prosecutors presenting a case built primarily on eyewitness testimony. 7 witnesses testified that they had seen Davis shoot Officer McPhail. The defense argued that Davis was not present at the scene and questioned the reliability of witness identifications made under stressful conditions at night. The jury convicted Davis on all charges and sentenced him to death. The conviction initiated 2 decades of appeals, with Davis's attorneys arguing that witnesses had recanted their testimony and that the case lacked physical evidence linking Davis to the crime. Multiple appeals were filed in state and federal courts, with Davis's legal team consistently maintaining his innocence and challenging the reliability of the witness testimony that had secured his conviction. September 21, 2011, ended Troy Anthony Davis's 22-year journey through the criminal justice system. Every appeal exhausted, every court had said no. Davis spent his final hours with family and spiritual advisors, still proclaiming innocence after 2 decades on death row. Prison officials followed standard protocols while witnesses gathered for Georgia's most controversial execution. Georgia restricts last meals to prison fare. Davis received a simple meal, consumed in solitude. His focus remained on innocence, not final preferences. At the appointed time, Davis entered the execution chamber. Witnesses filled the viewing area. Family members from both sides, media representatives, official observers. 22 years of legal battles led to this moment. Davis delivered his final statement: "I am innocent of the crime for which I am about to be executed." He expressed sympathy for the McFale family while maintaining he hadn't committed murder. Religious statements and prayers concluded his words. At 7:08 p.m., officials initiated lethal injection. Davis remained conscious for several minutes, medical personnel monitoring throughout. At 11:08 p.m., Troy Anthony Davis was pronounced dead at age 42. Reactions split dramatically. Davis supporters maintained an innocent man died. McFale family members expressed relief that justice was finally served. The execution closed a case that had generated international attention and raised fundamental questions about capital punishment.